Hello, welcome back to Seeds in an Apple. Again, my name is Apple. Isa akong mental health professional dito sa US, but these videos are specifically made for my Filipino brothers and sisters. And in this series, we're talking about grief and coping. And particularly for this episode, we're going to talk about the stages of grief. Ayan. Ang stages of grief, pinauso ho yan ng isang psychiatrist named Elizabeth Kübler Ross. And siya yung basically parang nag-promote niya ng different stages of grief. Meron siyang book na sinulat or pinublished that's called On Death and Dying. And specifically para siya sa mga terminally ill individuals. But this theory, the Kübler-Ross model of grief, basically, tinatalakay nito yung different stages ng pagluluksa ng isang tao, whether that be grief for lost relationships, lost security, or say financial, or like physical, like health, security, or death of loved ones. Ayan. So yung 5 stages of grief po, is ito sa mga popular known of stages of grief. Meron din iba na parang 7 stages of grief. But the 5 stages of grief, doon parang nagsimula yun, yung theory na ito. So these 5s are first yung denial, anger, and then bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So hindi ibig sabihin na ang isang tao ay would go through all of the different stages of grief, or it also doesn't mean that the person will go from one stage of grief on to the next and not go back to the other. So it's almost like a spectrum. Parang, some people will be maybe acceptance first before anger. Yung iba naman could be bargaining first before they feel depression. Some people don't feel all of the stages of grief. Some only maybe experience 1 or 2 of the stages. Ayan. So talakayin po natin ano yung ibig sabihin ng mga yon. So una, yung denial. This is when, it's really an overwhelming emotion for the individual. Grief is very universal. Lahat po tayo nakakaranas nito. Like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be grief over losing a loved one to death. It could mean a lot of things that we lose. We could grieve over those things. Yun. So this intense emotion na parang minsan nagpa-pretend ka na yung what happened or the loss that you have didn't happen. That's the denial. So we're in the denial stage. It usually it's actually a very common defense mechanism ng mga tao, especially kung nasa heightened emotion tayo. And so in order for us to maybe feel kind of like numb the feelings or to not feel the discomfort of the loss, and so we try to deny it. So that's the denial stage. So the downside to that, to having, the denial or maybe being stuck in denial, because what happens is that with all the different stages of grief, maaring ang isang tao, they can get stuck in one stage and andun lang sila. So ibig sabihin for their whole life, they could be in denial. And that will affect yung kanilang relationships, yung kanilang pananaw sa buhay, ganyan. So it's important for us to process those emotions. So when someone is in that stage and the tendency to be stuck in denial, later on, darating yung panahon na all of those emotions that you're trying to suppress will just come back and mas magiging kumbaga intense pa yung situation para sa'yo. So it can be even more difficult in your journey towards healing. Okay, so example ng denial, halimbawa, namatay yung mahal mo sa buhay, tapos sabihin mo, hindi, wala siya, or mabubuhay siya. Halimbawa, nasa hospital bed, mamaya gigising din siya, yung ganun. So, or halimbawa, you got diagnosed with cancer, and then you start saying, no, this is not happening. Mali yung pagkakadiagnose sa akin ng doktor. Hindi yung tama. Yung ganun. It's the wrong results. Okay, so those are example of when someone is in the denial stage. And I want to point out, it's important for us to understand and malaman natin kung ano yung mga nararamdaman natin. Nang sa ganun, alam natin paano siya i-counteract or paano natin siya i-process. Okay, so if you are in kind of that self-talk, so maaring nasa denial stage kayo. The next one will be anger. So this is not necessarily yung parang rage or yung galit na nagmamaktol o kaya naninira ng gamit. Not necessarily that. But a lot of times, these are pain that you carry, and sometimes it may manifest as maaring resentment, maaring bitterness, yung gano'n, parang bitter, may mga terms na naririnig natin online, yung parang ampalaya ka, ganyan, or you're just bitter, or you resent, yung meron kang pagkainis na nararamdaman, maaring dun sa tao na nawala, o kaya sa sitwasyon na nangyari sa'yo. So, again, not everyone will feel this. Some people, will feel anger. Yung iba naman, wala naman sa kanila yung feelings na yun. Okay. One of the things to assist or to help you kind of, process that anger or that feelings of resentment potentially could be to check your thinking, check your thought process. Saan nanggagaling yung inis mo, saan nanggagaling yung galit mo. Yun ba ay galit? Yun ba ay dahil may mga bagay ka na hindi nagawa na gusto mo sana nagawa mo bago nawala yung relationship o kaya yung mahal mo sa buhay, etc. It's important for us to process those emotions instead of suppressing them para hindi siya babalik later on at mas sabi nga, it'll bite us in the rear end. Okay, the other one is, yung next one, stage yung bargaining. Yan, ito yung, pagka nasa ganitong stage ka, you may feel very vulnerable. Parang pakiramdam mo, wala kang, parang helpless ka. Ganyan. Ito yung, again, this is not uncommon for many people. Sometimes, in order for them to find ways para mag-regain ang control sa buhay nila, dito na yung papasok yung mga what if. What if I could have done this? What if sana natawagan ko pa siya bago siya namatay? Sana naipasyal ko pa si nanay at si tatay bago sila nawala? Sana hindi na lang ako, nag-abroad para sana hindi nawala yung mahal ko sa buhay. Yung mga ganon. Or sana, maraming sana, mga what ifs. So, ito yun yung bargaining. Again, it's also parang defense din natin ito sa emotion ng grief. Dahil ayaw natin na ma-feel yung uncomfortable feelings ng grief, so we try to bargain instead. Parang pinopostpone mo yung feelings of sadness and hurt. So, halimbawa nito, yung mga yun, yung binanggit ko nga kanina, no? If only, tinawagan ko siya, ganyan, sana hindi yun nawala, mga ganun, bargaining. The next one is depression. This is very, very common, and most everybody would probably feel this. A lot of times, hindi nafe-feel ng ibang tao yung other stages, but depression for sure, nafe-feel nila. Okay, now I'm not saying everybody feels depression, but for the most part, a lot of people feel depression during, the grieving process. Dito yung, kumbaga, yung anger and yung bargaining, mas parang nagsasabi tayo ng kung ano yung nararamdaman natin. Sa depression naman, parang quiet stage ito. Yung a lot of times, nag-isolate yung tao, gustong nag-iisa, gusto nila na sila lang, parang they get lost in their own thoughts and in their own pain and their hurt na nararamdaman nila. They get, really lost in that. Sa stage na to ng depression, when you start having behaviors that take you away from what you used to do, halimbawa nga yung isolation, or having feelings or thoughts of suicide, like suicidal ideations, yung minsan pakiramdam mo na mas mainam na lang din na ikaw din nawala, or ikaw na lang ang nawala sa yung mga mahal mo sa buhay. And then it starts affecting your relationship, it starts affecting your life in a way na, hindi ka na nakakapasok sa trabaho, nakakapasok sa school, o kaya naging irritable ka na, ganyan. This, it's a good time, but it's best for you to seek help. This is where connections are important. Kailangan na magkaroon tayo ng connection, whether that be sa isang tao na we trust or a mental health professional or medical professional. Maaaring may mga yung mga nararamdaman natin na hindi lang tayo ang maaaring makatulong sa sarili natin, kundi kumaga kailangan din natin ng ibang tao para matulungan tayo. So this is where, accepting help from other people plays a really critical role. Importante yun nga, to build our connections. And if you are in this stage and you have, those thoughts and feelings like what I mentioned earlier, of wanting to die yourself or just feeling hopeless and worthless, please seek help. Please seek help. You're not alone, and there are people out there trained and also those who will lend their ears to you, who will be a confidant for you. So build connections. This is also a time where for those of us na halimbawa na nakikita natin ito sa ating mga mahal sa buhay, we see that they're depressed. This is a time for us to really be actively engaged in reaching out to our loved ones and make sure that they know that they matter and that they know that they are loved and that we are here for them, that you're going to be there for them. Right. The next one is acceptance, in stage 5, acceptance. Ito na yung parang uplifting stage na, kumbaga, ng grief na, okay, now I accepted na wala na talaga siya, and all the memories that I have of that person will just live on in me, yung mga ganun na mga pag-iisip na or dialogue. Yung ma-accept mo na halimbawa sa divorce or let's say naghiwalay kayo ng asawa mo, ganyan, you accept na okay, it was painful but this was, the best for my mental health, his mental health, and the mental health of our children, or our physical well-being, or ano pa man, that this is, the best. Yung mga ganong pag-iisip. So, na-accept mo na siya. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean that one stage, kumbaga, you experience one stage before you go on to the next stage. Sometimes it's again like a spectrum. You're sad or you're angry maybe one moment, the next, and then the next day or after a few weeks, now you feel kind of, okay, I've accepted everything. Or some people, they have accepted everything first, and then later down the road, maaring they suddenly would have these feelings of grief, or rather resentment or anger. Yan. So, kumbaga para siyang hindi siya yung actual stage, but it could be one to the next. Ayan. Yung isa naman na stages or group of stages, may parang extra siya na dalawa. So yun yung 7 stages of grief. So we have that shock and denial state na yun nga, parang disbelief or parang numb yung feelings mo. Especially pag yung parang sa very early onset ng grief. Let's say nalaman mo na nawala yung tatay mo halimbawa, and then there's that immediate initial shock and disbelief, and then comes pain and guilt. Sometimes maybe mafe-feel mo na kasalanan ko ito, or being guilty for losing your loved one, and then anger and bargaining, and then the next one is depression, and then there's that upward turn na tinatawag, and this is where parang medyo calm na yung state mo, or you get into this relaxed state, and then you're going to go through the reconstruction and working through. This is where you kind of put your life back together, putting the pieces back together, because you've accepted, or that you've felt now, okay, things are not going to change, or that things I can't control are still going to be there. So now I'm going to have to put the pieces of my life back together nang wala yung mahal mo sa buhay, or being a single mom or a single dad. And then of course, the acceptance, full acceptance and hope. This is yung parang yun yung gradual na you're going through the process where, okay, parang renewed yung hope mo, knowing that this is going to be the new way of my life at maraming mga possibilities that's gonna, happen in my life. Okay? So, yun yung mga different stages ng grief. And like I mentioned earlier, it's really important, especially again with grief and coping, for us to understand our emotions and also like understanding what stages we're on. Nang sa ganon, alam din natin kung ano yung help na kakailanganin natin. For our loved ones na na-observe natin ito sa ating mga mahal sa buhay, it's also very helpful for us. Nang sa ganun, hindi tayo, kumbaga, judgmental at sabihin lang na, kaya ka ganyan kasi wala lang, nag-iinarte ka lang, etc. Instead, you realize that, okay, you're going through this and this and this stages or processes, kaya ganyan yung actions mo. So we become more, kumbaga, understanding, and we know how best to help and be of comfort to our loved ones. A lot of times, ang kailangan lang naman nila is our ears to listen, our shoulders to lean on and cry on. Minsan hindi nila kailangan ng maraming kung ano-anong advice. Kailangan lang ng mga mahal natin sa buhay na nawalan, really is our love for them. Again, our understanding, non-judgmental, full acceptance, non-judgmental way. That's what they need from us. I hope that this was helpful for you, and please share it with anyone who might benefit from these videos. Thank you for being here, and until next time.